Early this morning, we've got three measures we're going to talk about today, and a couple of those are measures that have come out of a couple of moves that we've made in the budget document. So we're going to need to make sure that we follow them with statutory measures as well. But at this time, I'm going to ask Chairman Nix if he will to do an invocation for us. Amen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. First measure we're going to take up this morning is House Bill 22. And Representative Evans, sorry, y'all are both here, but Representative Evans, if you would please come to the podium and present your bill, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. I want to start out just quickly by saying thank you to Chairman Earhart for his guidance on this bill throughout the entire process, and thank you to the members of the Higher Education Subcommittee who passed this out unanimously and got us here this morning at 7:30. Thank you very much. What House Bill 22 does is makes the HOPE grant equal to the tuition costs at technical college. It doesn't cover any fees, doesn't cover any books, doesn't cover full costs for remedial courses. Those will remain at the percentage that they are now. And the bill doesn't affect the HOPE scholarship that goes to the traditional four-year school students in any way. So why do we need this bill? By 2020, the Department of Education estimates that we're going to need 60% of our Georgia citizens with some higher education credential. And 65 to 70% of those need to be in some technical field. We are not on track to meet those numbers. Right now we have only 42% of our Georgians with some higher education credential, and enrollment at our technical colleges is down. We all have heard about and read about the skills gap that exists in this state, where we have jobs that are unfilled and we have Georgians who are unemployed, and unfortunately the skills of those unemployed Georgians don't match up with the skills needed to fill our vacant jobs. And a lot of those jobs that are vacant are jobs where you can obtain the skills you need for those jobs are obtained in our technical colleges. We know that the students who are at our technical colleges and are the most likely to enroll in our technical colleges are the most price-sensitive students in higher education. So the difference between what the grant pays and what tuition is literally the difference between them being able to stay and having to leave or not being able to enroll in the first place. So this is a great way for us to help Georgians get on the track to a middle-class job and also help our business community fill the jobs that they need. So jobs that they need filled, building our workforce. So how do we pay for that? That's always the magic number. Seems like a good idea, but how do we pay for it? You have a fiscal note in front of you that shows that the cost for this would be $21 million. All of it would obviously come out of lottery money. This is not a general fund bill. The lottery is very healthy right now. They're seeing record returns to they're making record returns to our education fund, and they're to be commended for that. Our rainy day fund, so to speak, is running over. We've got plenty of rain in there. By law, by statute that we passed in 2011, we are required to hold in a reserve fund 50% of the prior year's payouts, which right now is $472 million. That money is safely tucked away in the reserve fund. We also have on top of that $412 million of unappropriated surplus on top of that reserve fund that we're required to hold. Now, I'm not suggesting that we pay for this bill out of either one of those buckets of money. What's also happening is that the unappropriated surplus funds have been growing by at least $63 million over the last 5 years. So that's 3 times recurring money, 3 times higher than what we need to pay for this bill. So I would submit that it's a good bill for Georgia, good bill for our business community, and we have the funds to make this investment in our people. And I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Okay, we do have some questions, and Chairman Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I got you turned on.
I'm turned on.
You're turned on. Well, your microphone is.
I have some news for you.
You drop the mic now.
Try it now.
Well, try that one. Try again.
Do you have the floor mics turned on?
Yes. It seems to be working. You just can't tell it.
Okay, there we
There it
go.
is.
I have some concerns. Of course, the section of the budget that I work with includes the pre-K program, which the governor has proposed and the House has approved. Some significant increases in funding for the pre-K program. And it's my understanding that we actually either had to dip into the reserve some or came very close to it with those additional expenditures that were made in this coming budget year. And then to add another $21 million at a minimum, because if I read this audit report, that's an estimate, and it's based on some assumptions that would include no increase in tuitions and no increase in the number of students. I'm concerned that we're going to put at risk pre-K, which means I look at that as pre-K is a long-term solution to our problems, and what you've got is a short-term. I hate for us to create a long-term problem to work on a short-term solution.
Right, and you hit the nail on the head, absolutely. Pre-K is our best long-term investment in our education and our workforce, and this is the best short-term investment that the business community desperately needs right now. And we, my office has looked really closely and made sure that we knew that the governor was putting a recommendation for additional money into the pre-K program, and we don't want to take away from that. I don't want to take away from that at all. I think that's a great, wise investment. But the $63 million in recurring funds, this is not the reserve. This is just new money that's coming into the lottery education fund every year, is enough to cover both of those. TCSG is a great steward of our money. The tuition, the concerns about tuition increases that you hear just are not real for TCSG. They have been wonderful at making sure that their tuition increases are minimal to null. The only time, actually, that they had a large increase in their tuition costs was when they saw their Hope dollars cut. So this is not going to be an invitation to them to raise their tuition.
But would this not increase the number of students?
Hopefully it would. So I mean, I can't say that over time it wouldn't go higher than 21 million. I think that we want it to, but that it's not a situation where you have the Hope Grant and the pre-K pitted against one another because of the health of the lottery and because of the continued record years that we're having. We can do both, and if ever we get in a situation where we see those go down, not only do we have a rainy day fund where the cup runneth over, but we also have the ability to come back here and make adjustments as we see fit to make sure that we can adequately fund all those programs. It's always subject to appropriations.
I mean, obviously, it's not been that long since we were really struggling to make sure that we had sufficient funds. I mean, it may look very healthy now, but that can obviously change rather quickly, is what I think the history of it is.
Right, and nothing that we're doing today puts in jeopardy the safeguards that we put into effect to make sure that we haven't promised more than we can deliver, because basically right now you start with the Lottery for Education Fund, and you've got the promises of pre-K, whatever the governor appropriates for that, and this General Assembly also appropriates. Then you have the Zell Miller Scholarship, which is the only full tuition scholarship to the four-year schools. This would create a full tuition grant for the technical colleges, showing our priorities as a state to fund our long-term investment in pre-K, keep our best and brightest here in Georgia through the Zell Miller Scholarship, and then grow our workforce through the Zell Miller Grant. But the amount of the award for the Hope Scholarship is always a percentage based on the health of the lottery, and that is by far the largest expenditure out of the lottery fund. So I don't see this as putting at risk our pre-K funds, and I wouldn't want it to do that.
Chairman Coomer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions. One is kind of straightforward, just for my education. Can you tell me what the student's current academic year standard undergraduate tuition amount is?
It's $79 or $89 per credit hour, and so it depends on how many credits a student is enrolled.
Is that established by statute or by the university or by the TCSG, or who sets that?
TCSG.
Okay. And then the other question relates to the enrollment issue. I know in the last few years, when we were in the recession, we saw enrollment increase substantially in technical colleges. And as we have come out of the recession, we've seen enrollment decrease pretty precipitously. Mm-hmm. I did some of my own research locally to figure out what was going on there, and what I found anecdotally was a lot of students were leaving the programs because they were getting job offers, which of course is a good thing. We want people to be working more than we want them to be staying in school if they don't need to be there. But I heard you say that the lack of funding or the gap in funding between the current grants and the tuition rate is a cause of students for dropping out and not being able to return to school. Do you have any data to support that particular position?
Only anecdotal, just from visiting college campuses and talking to students and talking to professors and talking to financial aid officers. But the real crux of my statement was that because these students are so price sensitive, oftentimes the $300 or $400 difference in what the Hope Grant pays and what the tuition costs can be the difference between them being able to go or not go, or the difference between them being able to stay or not stay. And absolutely, there are many theories about why the enrollment has dropped, but the fact remains that we do have unfilled jobs that require skills that you get at technical college, and we do have enrollment going down. So there is a way to at least match up those students or those Georgians who, for whatever reason, haven't been able to go to school. Perhaps it's for money. This would help solve that. And if indeed enrollment continues to go down because students and Georgians are getting jobs without needing to go for higher education, then you're only going to see the cost for this bill go down. So I don't think there's a risk there.
Okay. Chairman Earhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Evans, as you know, you and I have worked on these TCSG grant issues for the last probably 6 years and have had some significant success in at least 2 bills previously. And as you also know, we were very supportive in the subcommittee. We still have the question, and I'm getting a lot of this same question, of the statutory reserve is funded. The surplus has 412, and it is growing at a rate of 63. But is there, and I've asked the budget office to try to create a formula. I know you and I have tried to work out language with respect to how you could offset this if that reserve does not grow. I think Chairman Nix asked the question in the committee hearing, and I'm getting a lot of that question subsequent to our subcommittee. Have you given any more thought to how we could set up a qualifier in there for if this reserve was not there? Well, the reserve is going to be there, but the surplus was not $63 million a year, and we're in a deficit. What do we do then?
I have looked at that issue and tried to craft language, and because the way that the statute is written for how the lottery funds are spent through HOPE or otherwise, because you've already got a qualifier in there that says subject to appropriation, it doesn't seem like there's any other way you can do it, because that's essentially what you're saying. If there's not enough money, we don't want to have to fund this, and we already have that. Since the amount that goes into the amount that's considered surplus, or the amount that gets reserved, well, the amount that gets reserved is set by statute, but the amount that goes into the surplus just depends on how much we allocate, and really has the most to do with how much we allocate as the percentage that we pay for the regular Hope Scholarship. So if we decide we want to pay more on the Hope Scholarship, then the money that goes into the surplus goes down. If we pay less, then it goes up. But that's not necessarily reflective of the growth in the lottery. It really just depends on what we assign as the factor rate for the Hope Scholarship. So I continue to be willing to work on that issue, but I think personally I would like to see the bill move forward as it is, obviously, because I think it reflects a priority that I think a lot of folks in here have, which is to show that growing our workforce and growing our skilled workforce through the technical colleges is a priority of these lottery dollars.
I understand that. I've gotten a lot of questions along the lines of Chairman Dixon's and with respect to the 20 or so workforce development initiatives that we are funding at the full grant, and we continue to add to those. As you know, I've been an advocate for this, but I am
Absolutely.
Getting a lot of push.
Absolutely, I understand. And just so the committee's aware, the dollars that we invest in our students, in TSG, in building our workforce are so well used. It's hard to even put it into words, because the job placement rates at TCSG are at every institution 95% and higher, and at many institutions 100%. They simply don't offer a degree program that's not in demand. If a student goes to a technical college and walks out with a certificate, they will walk into a job, period.
All right. Representative Quick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Evans, we've heard a lot since last session about alternative funding sources to shore up the Hope Scholarship funds, and so I share the fiscal concerns that have been expressed, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding. There's nothing in this measure which targets needs versus student wants in terms of workforce development. In other words, it doesn't target additional funds to workforce needs in any way for the future.
Well, it does because of what I just said about the job placement rates at our colleges. Every degree program that we would be putting a student in by virtue of the Hope Grant is a workforce development need and is a job ready to be filled.
But these grants would apply to every course and every course of study, would they not, that the student selected?
They would, but every course of study that's available for a student to choose at technical colleges are in demand. And like I said, the job placement rates are nearly 100% and no lower than 95% on any campus. Every single technical college program at every campus has an industry advisory board. So whenever those jobs are no longer in demand, the industry will tell the institution, you can shut this degree program down, or maybe you want to offer less slots because our needs are going down. That happened a lot up at Northwest Georgia Technical College when you saw a lot of changing in the flooring industry, carpet to hardwood. They had to change. The schools changed their programs to meet the needs. It also happened on the Rome campus when they opened several. I don't know if they were cancer treatment centers or some health treatment centers that needed anesthesiology assistance. So they opened a program to meet that need, and then when that demand went down, they closed down the program. So yes, students are able to choose which degree program they want to go into, but they are not given a choice of a degree program in a technical college that's not in demand.
Vice Chairman Nimmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Evans, and I think you were just touching on it off of Representative Quick's question on the in-demand industries. Just one concern I had, and if you could speak to it, would this not pull away or harm in some kind of way what the governor's initiative and this body's initiative has been over the past couple of years, identify some strategic initiatives for the TCSG programs?
No, I don't think so at all. In fact, I think this complements that initiative perfectly so that they can work hand in glove. What I've heard on technical college campuses from students, or mostly from the faculty, is that the strategic industry grant, a student won't find out about a strategic industry grant until they get there. It's not going to drive a student in the door, whereas the grant would drive a student in the door, and then they find out this is a targeted program by the General Assembly. There's actually additional money available for you to pay for your books and fees, I believe, out of this, or I know out of the strategic industry grant. So the grant gets them to the campus. The awareness of the grant gets them to the campus, and then then they find out about the strategic industry workforce grant, and that pushes them into the like I said, all programs are in demand, but those are sort of in demand on steroids. So I believe it will only complement it, and those funds, I believe I'm correct in saying, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that those funds are actually general funds.
I understand the lady's explanation. I would appreciate a time, maybe you and I'm sorry I haven't gotten to you before this. I want to respectfully disagree. I think just on the crux of me reading this and the way I understand it, I think we would have a negative effect on the strategic initiatives that we've put forward, but I want to discuss that further with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think, though, that those grants would give over and above what the HOPE grant gives, and this might actually save some dollars on that program while still getting us to the same goal. But I'd be happy to talk to you further about that.
Thank you.
Leader Abrams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Evans, is it not true that this is a strategic bill that allows our technical college system to expand its reach within the entire state? That, to Chairman Nimmer's point, you have some strategic initiatives that the governor has identified, but they occur in certain segments of the state, whereas the TCG system is a statewide system. And this would allow us to encourage technical college students from across the state to attend at a much higher rate.
Yes, I agree with that. And I think y'all all know that I was not a HOPE grant recipient, but a HOPE scholarship recipient. And that drove me to college, not because I knew much about what the cost of attendance was at a school or all the different components, fees, books, tuition, percentage of tuition, all those things. But I knew about the scholarship, and I knew that if I could just qualify for the scholarship, then I would be able to go to school. And I think that's been the beauty of the HOPE program, and the beauty of the HOPE grant is it's easy to understand. If you qualify, if you are a Georgia student, you want to go to a technical college, your tuition will be covered, and it just gets you into the door. And I think a lot of times these strategic industry areas that we've identified are obviously in demand, and we want to drive as many students there as we can, but they also they cost some of the programs, like for example truck driving. I've heard from a campus where that costs a lot of money for them to offer, and even though we can incentivize the student with the strategic industry grant, they may not be able to open up more slots for that, and this just allows more students to get into many different degree programs.
Can you describe the profile of the average technical college student in our system?
A 28-year-old female, a white female, single mom.
And so, do you know the top three, instead of that, in terms of the number of students who would benefit from this? The way I read this bill, this is a permissive bill. It permits this legislature to say that to the extent that funds are available, we will say that we're going to cover the cost of education. If those funds are not available, as we do with everything else, we will simply not appropriate the funds for that purpose. But this allows the planning for the department, for TCSG, it allows them to plan for more students to attend and for more students to have full coverage so that we can increase our college completion rate and our workforce training rates.
Yes, very well stated.
Chairman Nix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you've described this, and we've talked about how when the economy's down, the enrollment goes up in the technical colleges. When the economy picks up, the enrollment goes down. And you've described this as a student who maybe needs a few $100s here or there. My question is this, two things. Have you discussed this with the schools? Is this truly an identified need that is broad-based, or is it very specific? We do have, I believe, needs-based opportunities within those schools. If that 28-year-old single mom is running out of money, aren't there other sources that she can go to, various grants, other government-related programs that they can go to get a little bit of extra help?
To your first question about whether it's, I've talked to the college and it's identified need, yes. In fact, after this General Assembly made a change to put the to expand the grant and lower the scholarship back to the original 2.0, I went on a tour of 5 or 6 different campuses throughout the state and asked, how is this helping and what else do you need? And the answer unanimously was, yes, it helped, thank you. I think that brought back about 5,000 students. And then the next immediately was, but we really need to get the grant to equal full tuition again because our students just are not able to make up that difference. Now, are there other places they can go? The answer to that is yes, there are other options, but they are lower for technical college students than they are for students at our traditional four-year schools. And the reason for that is this. There is an ability to get Pell, but Pell is not what it used to be. Even if you qualify at the highest amounts, a lot of times these students are not just trying to get themselves through school, but since they're older and their second time around, a lot of times these students are getting retrained in areas because the area they were originally in is no longer in demand. So they're more likely to already have families and obligations that come with families. So the traditional student aid is not necessarily enough to keep their household going while they go and try to better themselves and get skills that put them into an in-demand position. But prior to 2011, technical college campuses did not enter into the relationships with the federal government necessary to offer their students gap in what tuition costs and what the grant covered. Because, like I said earlier, the students that are in technical college are most likely to be the most price sensitive, that also, and from households of less than $40,000, almost all of them. So they're less credit savvy. And so unfortunately, when a technical college campus entered into a relationship with the federal government to offer student loans, they couldn't make it so that those students were only getting that amount, that few $100 amount. They were getting offered thousands of dollars. And because they weren't credit savvy, they were taking it. And the system saw the default rates start to creep up. And that was scary, and so they cut that off, because if your default rates are high, it can put in jeopardy your accreditation, which can limit your ability to even offer your students the ability to apply for Pell. So I say all that to say students at a lot of TCSG campuses can't qualify for student loans to make up that gap. So while there is some aid available to them, it's much less than what you would think of in a traditional higher education environment.
Okay. I understand the need, but I'm still a little concerned about 4 or 5 years down the road, the economy turns down, and then we get to the point where this reserve would suddenly dry up, and we would be back in a position where we're having to say we can't do this. So that's my biggest concern. I think I was the one that raised that concern earlier. So that's my biggest concern.
Absolutely. And like I said, we've still got the trigger that the Hope Scholarship only covers a percentage. We're not over-promising here. And the fund is so healthy. The governor and this legislature have done a really good job of growing that reserve fund and growing the surplus on top of the reserve fund, and our lottery revenues continue to go up. So, and it's always subject to appropriation. So I think we're safe, but I understand the concern.
Okay. Chairman Reinders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your passion as it relates to the hope. I've got a philosophical and then a weeds kind of question. The first one is, since I've been up here, I've heard over and over and over again, save the hope. We got to save the hope. And it's a great program. I'm just trying to wrap my mind around how do we say that when next year, if we're looking at something else, how do we say we're saving the hope if we're spending the reserves and we see the fluctuation in enrollment, we see the fluctuation in the need, we don't calculate tuition? How do you tell me, let's go ahead and spend what we have, and then next year or the year after we're going to be talking about saving the hope? How do you mentally how would you message that? If you're me, what would you tell me to say?
Well, I've spent some time talking about the health of the reserve fund because I just think it's a nice backdrop to understand that if we run into hard times, we are more than covered in the way that we anticipated as a General Assembly that we might need to. We create a rainy day fund for a rainy day, but I want to be clear, I'm not advocating that we spend a dime from that rainy day fund, from that reserve, or from the unappropriated surplus. I'm talking about lottery education dollars that are anticipated by lottery ticket buyers and the general public that money is going to go to education. That's new money coming in for this very purpose that I'm advocating that we spend for this very purpose.
So you don't see down the road of us having to say that we didn't save it because we spent something else here?
I don't. I mean, will we one day have to dip into the either unappropriated surplus of $412 million or the restricted reserve of $472 million? Maybe, probably, at some point. But am I advocating that today, and am I advocating either of those places as a recurring revenue source? Absolutely not.
And finally, the weed question is, the hardest thing we do is the one-size-fits-all kind of mentality. And you mentioned the trucking. We know there's areas of shortage, but we also know who gets the most diplomas, what fields get the most diplomas and certificates. And I can tell you from a South Georgia perspective, we may need more truck drivers or brick masons than we do cosmetology or something like that. Why wouldn't you look at, instead of the cost being so big, kind of take a bite of the apple in smaller bites and really use it to the areas that we need it the most instead of a one-size-fits-all kind of mentality?
I would argue we're already doing that through the strategic industry workforce grants, which I think are a fantastic initiative to make sure that we are driving as many people possible into the areas that we need them in. But a lot of students a lot of Georgians who are without skills and without jobs are not going to know about that unless they get on the campus, and this grant gets them on the campus to find out about the aid that's available to them over and above tuition, and sometimes I think even over and above tuition and fees, to drive them toward those areas. That will not go away.
I think we have a disagreement. I want more students in those areas that we need them than the areas that we have plenty of slots filled. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We've got 4 remaining, and I'm going to, because we do have 2 other measures to take up, I'm going to cut it off at those 4. And Representative Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Evans, can you, I know you put a lot of work into this bill and have been very thoughtful about the long-term effects of it, but can you talk a little bit, is it not true that currently TCSG students can go back and be retrained in fields?
Yes. Well, a student can always go back. I mean, obviously can go back and get retrained. And in fact, we actually see a lot of students who go through our university system who end up graduating and then being unemployed and needing to go back and get trained in a skilled area. But this may be your question. If you graduate from a TCSG school and you go down to the workforce, and for whatever reason your employer does not think that you're up to snuff,
right,
TCSG will retrain that student for without additional cost to the employer or the student.
That is my question.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and it's very rare that happens. That's how good of a product they put out. I think it's less than a couple of % that ever happens, but that is available, yes.
Yeah, I left out the word for free. But in my industry, I see a lot of young people in the age you're talking about who didn't have this opportunity, who really do need to go back and be retrained to be adequate in the workforce. So can you talk, you touched on it a little bit, can you just talk a little bit about that long-term investment that we are making with these students going to TCSG schools and coming out with those workforce skills?
Yeah, I mean, if you spend any time on a TCSG campus, you know that they're in the business of changing lives, and they'll tell you that. It's not simply about coming in, going to class, and leaving. They really make an investment and build relationships with those students that last much longer than their walk across the graduation stage. Absolutely.
Chairman Chokas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Evans, I congratulate you on this bill. And I wanted to bring some numbers and some information about TCSG that hasn't been brought up in the conversation thus far. And we've talked about the students being non-traditional. Many of them have dropped out. Many of them are just receiving their GEDs and continuing their education because they're seeking employment. You correctly said that 95% as a minimum get jobs when they graduate. At South Georgia Tech in Americus, that number is 98 point something. We're also looking at dual enrollment and keeping kids in schools with our technical college system, and that has been a success. And we talked earlier, I think a couple of years ago, in Chairman Smith, Lynn Smith, at one time we toured her campus to talk about dual enrollment. It's also the cost per credit hour is very low because of the way the credit hours are done. Most of college professors are adjunct professors, and so they keep the prices low. Our funding for TCSG is a fraction of what we spend at the university system of Georgia. The other point, there's two more points I want to make. Number one is our technical college system has partnerships with industry. They create programs that are in demand. At South Georgia Tech in Americus, we have a partnership with Caterpillar. We have a partnership with John Deere, and we're doing another partnership with Kaufman Tire. These partnerships where they go to school, they work, they go to school, they work, brings the students to the workforce. And the point that I want to make, and the reason I brought all this up, is the revenue growth that we've had, and the reason we have an increase in our budget is we get our revenue from the three-legged stool: individual income tax, corporate income tax, and sales tax. And if you look at the revenue numbers that are being published by the governor today, the lion's share of the growth is in individual income tax. Corporate income tax still is flat. We had growth in corporate income tax in January, but that was because there were less refunds. Sales tax is flat, showing a 1 or 2% growth. Our individual income tax has shown a growth in January of 7.9%. That's being fueled by the governor's program of making this the best state to do business, to create jobs. And the point that I'm trying to make is it's working. The jobs that these students will get when they graduate will fuel the economy even more because, as I said, the individual income tax is where the growth is. So if you factor in individual income tax and these students getting jobs immediately upon graduation, we're going to see revenue growth in other areas. May not show up in the lottery sales, but that's a different animal altogether. But we're seeing it today because of the governor's focus on job creation, and I think that your proposal will show a much bigger increase than the $21 million that we're proposing right now. And I thank you and congratulate you for doing it.
Thank you. Couldn't agree more.
Chairman Earhart for a comment.
Representative Evans, as we've continued to talk, you mentioned that the subject to appropriation language that's in this bill would allow us the capacity to make a decision, but we've yet to really determine well, I guess what I'm saying is this legislature would be the ones that are on the hook for so-called cutting of the grant if the surplus to the surplus ran out. If we could find a formula that would allow that not to be the responsibility of the legislature in that sense, I think that's the sense I'm hearing of this committee. That's just, I think that's the concern that's been expressed to me and others.
Vice Chairman Nimmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Evans, just one quick question. I noticed we're talking a lot about tuitions and grants and everything here with this program. And I noticed we have President Chastain in the back with Georgia Student Finance Commission. Has there been any consultation with them and how this may affect positively or negatively or anything with the way they administer grants and
with the way, well, we've been in contact with them. They've been a great source of data for us to present to you about the bill. But I don't know if there are any concerns about administration. I don't believe so. I haven't.
Okay.
It shouldn't affect.
That may be when you and I have an opportunity to follow up on my previous question. I may want to circle them in and just get their input on something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they will administer how we tell them to.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Chairman Dixon.
Mr. Chairman, based on my concerns about where we're headed with this and the potential of impact on existing programs, I'd move that we table this measure at this time.
Have a motion and numerous seconds to table the bill. All those in favor of tabling House Bill 22 until further time, until some of the concerns can be addressed. And I know the lady will be glad to work with everyone to answer their concerns and questions. All those in favor of tabling, let it be known saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign.
No.
Ayes carry. Thank you, ma'am. Did a good job on,
Thank you.
on a barrage of questions. Have two other bills before us this morning. We've made some adjustments within the budget. Those do require some statutory changes as well. And first up will be House Bill 1084. It's Chair Lady Houston, and you'll be working from LC 256577 that is on your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know you've heard this before. This is a real simple bill. This legislation amends the code section to assign the process of reading, maintaining, and management of all aspects of the agricultural water metering program to the Georgia Forestry Commission. Presently, the Georgia Forestry Commission is already reading 3/4 of the meters. If I have any questions on this, I'll be glad to take them.
Do have a question, Chairman Nix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a guy send me an email, and he said, I've never contacted my state representative before. He's been on the old Soil, Water, and Conservation Board forever. And he wants to know why we're doing this. Could you tell me why we're doing this?
Well, one of the reasons we're doing this is that the committee looked at this, and the contract the grant from One Georgia for reading the meters was about $1 million, and Georgia Forestry, they contracted for them to read it, and they contracted at $100,000.
So a significant decrease
and we
in
think
cost.
we can get it done at a lot cheaper and save the taxpayers about $500,000.
Okay. One more question, please? You said that the Forestry Association, a Forestry Commission, is already reading about 75% of the
Correct.
cost, even before we did this?
Yes, for $100,000.
Okay. Thank you.
And we had asked them before we got delved into it to renegotiate their contract, and they think they can read them for $16 a meter. And we worked with our vice chairman and members of the committee, and they worked out. And we have some farmers and some people on our committee that know a lot more about irrigation than I do, and this is the number we came up with. So we allotted $450,000 in our budget, and you'll see the language in the budget. Okay. On both of those. And we feel like it's going to be a real cost savings to the state.
Leader Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Chairman, does this also include the reading, the maintenance, and the installation of new meters? Is that correct?
Correct. But some of the meters, we feel like when they go to read the meters and they're not functioning, that they can be fixed right there on the spot without having to go back. Because according to Representative Watson, some of the meters just need batteries in it, and they'll be able to put batteries because they're run on batteries and everything. A lot of them can be fixed right there.
Just to follow up, so forestry will be able to accomplish that part of this program when they're checking the
We
meters?
feel like they can.
Okay, there appear to be no further questions. Do we have a motion? Have a motion to do pass. Do we have a second? Numerous seconds. This did report out of Chair Lady Houston's subcommittee yesterday. No further questions? All those in favor, please let me know by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Next bill is going to be House Bill 1085, LC number 372152. This is Chair Lady Dempsey's bill dealing with CCSP and the alignment of that as it corresponds to a move in the budget. Chair Lady?
Thank you, Chairman England. Good morning. This bill simply designates that the Department of Community Health will be the administrator of Community Care Services Program, CCSP. The House has already moved the associated funding from this waiver from the Division of Aging at the Department of Human Services to DCH. So it is in the 2017 budget today, in the House budget. The administration of the program must be statutorily transferred. CCSP assists older adults and or functionally disabled consumers by providing a range of community-based services through the Medicaid program. The waiver is similar but not exactly identical to the source waiver, which DCH already administers. Additionally, the source and CCSP waivers utilize the same waiver authority. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to try to address them.
One question, and it is Representative Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the author of the bill, what effect is this going to have on the citizens who utilize these services? Is this just an administrative change, or will they see an increase or greater outcomes by transferring the administration?
Well, there are two questions in that, actually. The House did increase some of the funding for this, but what we are actually doing is aligning the services with the agency which will be funding them at the same time, instead of having it in two different agencies.
If I might add, it helps streamline, because the federal funding comes down through DCH, but it was a pass-through over to DHS, and that did cause some complications in the past, and so this would just align the funding stream with the expenditure. Any further questions? Seeing none, do we have a motion? Move do pass. Second. Numerous seconds. All in favor, let it be known, saying aye. All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you, and we are adjourned. Do want to announce that there is a breakfast down in up in 450 in the Capitol from 8 till 10. Our friends from Valdosta State University would like to see you there if you can make it. Thank you.